What's up guys, my name is Lex Veldhuis and welcome to another episode of Poker Coaching. Today we're gonna learn a lot about hand categorization and also why it's important to always start with the pre-flop ranges. The first hand is gonna be from a deep run in the 1-9 warm-up on PokerStars, a Sunday major, and there's only 30 players left. This is good. Man. Wow. What a weird spot.
All right, let's get straight into it.
Okay, so deep in the tournament, flatting here. I think if I'm a little bit earlier with more people behind me, I could make small 3-bets sometimes with this hand. Sort of like a bluff. But I think I can flat as well, relatively easy.
Sure. Yeah. This spot's close. You can go probably in either direction between calling and 3-betting. I like both lines, but calling was acceptable as kind of, I went quickly because calling's fine. So your call is good, and it checks to you. And what are you thinking about now?
I feel like I just want to stab a lot in position here, especially deeper in the tournament. I think my range tightens up a little bit in what I'm flatting, so I want to stab a lot. Also, I just great boards for my hand. You know, I think if I have like pocket threes, I could stab here quite a bit as well, or something random. Now that I actually do have a hand, I'd like to bet as well.
Sure, this is good.
Okay, here it gets iffy, because now I'm just like, I remember regretting not betting because I feel like there's a lot of hands. You know, I bet like 27% on the flop or something, so I kind of feel like there's still some ace-jack, some, ace-king of hearts, ace-jack of spades, ace-jack of clubs, ace-jack of hearts, that sort of thing. I still think there's king-10, jack-10 could be check-calling, jack-9 suited, queen-jack. So, you know, there's all these hands that I do insanely well against. Obviously, I said there's still king-10 in, but there's also, I do think that king-10 and king-jack are also going to check-raise the flop. On top of that, I block those hands. So, yeah, I don't know. It felt a bit sad to just check back because I feel like there's so many hands that I do really well against that will call a bet. And I kind of feel like my betting strategy gets fucked once I check on the turn. Like, I don't think the river is going to be as easy for me.
So the turn's close, and it's the type of hand that you could play either way. This is basically a medium strength hand, but it's a strong medium strength hand. And so, why is it a medium strength hand? Well, yeah, I mean, you lose to a lot of hands, right? You lose to straights, you lose to two-pair combos. Those are all very visible. You lose to overpairs, which are still possibilities. So like there are plenty of hands that you lose to, and there are plenty of hands that you have yourself that beat this one. So in that context, this is not like the strongest hand you can have here. It's a very coordinated board. You're going to be investing a lot of money when you barrel here against some hands that you just have basically zero against. I mean, if your opponent has king-jack, you're screwed. So yeah, you're going to see more likely than not mixing with this hand, where both betting and checking are reasonable. My opinion, betting with the king of hearts is probably better than betting without the king of hearts. So there's probably a slight preference for that, but it's going to be very close, and you could go either way. So both betting and checking are reasonable lines. So you can't really make a mistake here, in my opinion. So you like to check, your opponent checks, and go ahead.
Yeah, there's definitely some hearts, but having the king of hearts here makes it feel a lot more secure. But you know, I still think that he has jack-9, ace-9, 10-9, maybe even some queens. You know, they're still really strong hands, and I kind of feel like I do cap myself by checking the turn. I mean, I will have some flushes for sure, but I won't have a straight. I probably don't have boats. At this point, I'm just kind of like, okay, whatever. You know, the 9 pairing, I think, honestly, apart from like an ace or something, is the worst card in the deck. So I just decided to check back for that reason.
Okay, so let's talk about how your opponent's range should be constructed. So when your opponent checks the river, they don't have a 9 very often. So when they check call the flop with jack-9, if they check call the flop with ace-9, which would make a lot of sense, like ace-9 suited or something, even ace-9 offsuit. If they have that 9, they can't really check raise this river with that 9, right? It's too thin, right? They're going to run into straights sometimes. They're going to run into flushes. So a trips combo here for your opponent is not going to be the type of combo that they should check raise. In addition to that, it's not as though you have a lot of very visible thin value bets. So when you do bet, your range is not going to be totally polarized, but it's not like you're value betting here with a pair of tens. And some of we mentioned that a pair of queens could mix a turn and could have potentially bet. So there's not an abundance of pairs of queens here for you to even consider betting either. So you don't have an abundance of a pair of queens. You wouldn't value bet a pair of tens. You don't have kings or aces. You mostly barrel those on the turn if you could, even if you could have them. Although aces maybe checks a little bit more than kings on the turn. So you don't have the types of hands that will like thinly value bet such that a trip should be a check raise. That's not the way that your range will be constructed here. So if your opponent has trips, they should just bet. Okay. So once they check, you're concerned about hands that are going to be check raises. So they could have, King Jack of Hearts, for example, would be a cool hand to check raise. Even a hand as strong as King Jack, I don't believe is like a great. It makes more sense to check raise King Jack because it unblocks 9x, which is actually probably a decent part of your value betting range once you do bet. Because you could bet the flop. You bet to a small size, multi-way. You could definitely bet the flop with hands like 9-8 of clubs. You could definitely bet the flop with hands like Jack 9 of clubs. So betting the flop with a pair of nines is totally reasonable for you. So you can still have trips. And so it's possible that King Jack is strong enough to check raise. I'm not sure about that. But trip nines is definitely not strong enough to check raise just because it blocks where the value would be coming from. So if your opponent has trips, they're probably going to bet themselves. Their checking range when you lose becomes flushes, boats, and straights. So like really high-end traps. And they end up betting here very often, even with those hands. So those hands are not pure checks. They're just the way that they will check in that you will lose. Your opponent should probably be blocking a lot with ace queen as well, although ace queen's kind of close considering the ace blocker is an interesting one. But I do think your opponent will probably be better off betting here with most of their ace queen combos as well. So once they check, they're in a situation where yes, they have the check raise traps, absolutely. But they become dense combos like queen 8 suited or jack 10 suited or king 10 suited, the hands that just are trying to realize equity, that are incapable of value betting because it would be too thin. That's where the majority of your opponent's range is going to come from. And then it will be offset or protected, however you want to think about it, with traps that are capable of check raising. And in that context, this King of Hearts is extraordinarily relevant.
Yeah.
Because this is a very significant card around blocking those traps. So when you have this King of Hearts in your hand, you significantly increase the probability that you're up against the hands that you beat. As a result of that, I probably would have valued that, even though I do think it's quite thin.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
You checked, and you're up against jacks, which is the same type of pair of tens type of hand, right? It's this equity realization, just trying to flip the hand face up, too thin to value bet type of holding that I expect to run into.
Cool, thank you.
Awesome, yeah, no problem. All right.
So really nice insight there from BBZ. Oftentimes in my streams, I tell you guys when you're trying to think about a future street decision on the turn or the river, to always keep in mind what happened before the flop. The raising range for my cutoff is really vital to come to this decision, so I'm really happy that BBZ pointed it out. You can see that this happens on every single level, and it's an important reminder for me as well. Now, the next hand we're going to play in a $5,000 tournament, one of the toughest players you can play, Malaka style. I think he's one of the top 3 people I run into every Sunday. I have an incredibly tough blind versus blind spot, and I can't wait to hear what BBZ has to say about it. I could strangle this fucking cunt, you know that? Jesus Christ. He's so annoyingly good. But at the same time, you have to realize, like, this guy is also hitting hands, you know what I mean? Like, this is not like this guy has, like, fucking 7-8 of hearts and just thinks, like, you know what? I'm all in, you know?
Alright, let's get straight into it. So, you limp to small blind. You can start off with this even. Are you doing any raising here? How do you think about this?
Yeah, I generally mix. I'm definitely raising a lot of my strongest kings from the small blind, definitely suited, like king 9 plus. But I also tend to mix these hands as well to a certain degree. I will say also that I just had 4 limps in a row, and I know we shouldn't always be really looking at that, but I had 4 limps in a row, so it felt really good to limp something strong and not be blasted, just as sort of like some sort of weird micro balance, you know?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think everything you said I agree with, so all solid. You get ISO'd, so you catch your little micro balance here because you have a strong hand, which is nice. We call, I think it's pretty good. Move to the flop. Checking is the play, right? So that's totally fine. And now what are you thinking?
Yeah, I just think I have one option, it's call. I don't think my hand, like massively overplaying if I raise. I was a bit surprised to see pot. It's probably the lack of knowledge that made me surprised, but I generally thought that this is mainly like a check, or that it mixes check or bet 1/3 pot mostly. Yeah, for spot, I mean, there's only one thing to do, and that's call.
Yeah, I would be a little bit surprised by this bet size as well. It's a little bit large considering the stack to pot ratio. You're not very deep, so because you're not very deep, a bet of this size is somewhat unnecessary. This player isn't like, if they chose a smaller size, they would still have no problem investing their stack across the flop, turn, and river. So a smaller size is probably slightly more appropriate, unless this 6 is more like an 8 or a 9, which introduces more draws or essentially more threats to the mate equity over here. So I think on this board, this is too big of a bet, but I don't think it's crazy. But you should be surprised. I don't think this is like something that you should have expected to see or encounter. So you called, which I think is probably the correct play. I would point out that some of your queen X is likely to be folding now. So if you have hands that you limp called like queen 5 of hearts, you should be prepared to fold those. But this one I think is not the case that it plays like that. So I think this call is quite good.
Okay, that's a good point though.
So you check again, which is again. Well, actually, why don't you think about? Why don't you tell me? What do you think about this?
I think I definitely want to have some sort of leading range here as well, especially versus the pot bet, because my range gets so much stronger. I think that it's pretty cool to balance in some flush draws that could lead small, maybe ace-x. I mean, it's great, in general, if I can have him fold certain king high hands or whatever, or other hands that have equity versus, when I have a hand like 8-7 suited or something, 8-7 of diamonds. So I definitely think that I can lead small here sometime, but I just don't think that this hand falls into that bucket.
So when your opponent bets pot, they should be polarized, right? Like they don't have queen X. They shouldn't really have 6X. Like they should be, for the most part, they should have like a lot of ace king. I mean, that's like, if you think about one hand that they should have on the value betting side, the hand that makes the most sense is going to be ace king. This is really difficult to think about, like leading versus checking. I think that your range has too many combos in it to like that are like too much 6X, too much queen X to start leading here. So I think that the lead is reasonable, but I think it's probably going to play to just check in a situation like this one. So I do think that we should probably mostly just be checking the turn, which is what you did. So I think that's good. To the river, diamonds fill, and now what?
I definitely, it's a bit hard because like you said, I don't think that he's really I mean, I realize this as you are talking. This is not what I realized in game, but I realize that he just doesn't have that much queen X, because if he has queen 10, he's not going to be like, oh, bet pot on the flop. So if he's super polarized and he checks on the turn, that means that I just have like a pure bluff catcher with the diamond getting there. I bet 1/3, but I think that it's like, I just don't think the hand is sort of like strong enough to do that with, because I don't want to bet call. It's pretty good, but it's hard to get value from less as well, because if he doesn't have any weaker queens, what does he have that he can call with, Therefore, I think I should have checked. But yeah, I mean, I bet 1/3 for value.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as like where is my value going to come from? That's a very important question to answer, and you're having a difficult time answering it. That's reasonable, because it's not. This is tough. The main combo that you're going to generate value from here is actually going to be queen 6. So queen 6 is the type of hand that your opponent would pot the flop with, and it's also the type of hand that absolutely hated that turn. So queen 6 is the most likely candidate to call you if you bet and then lose, right? Because obviously, we need to get called, but then we need to win, right? So we don't just need to get called; we need to get called and win. So where's that going to happen? It's probably going to happen queen 6. Queen 6 is going to be the hand that really, really likes a big bet on the flop. Absolutely loathes this turn, checks, and then is too strong to fold versus a small bet, so it calls. That's going to be where most of your value is going to come from. As far as your bet size goes, first of all, betting the river does make a lot of sense. Why does it make a lot of sense? It makes sense because once your opponent checks here, they become weaker, a lot weaker. Their most likely holdings will be air, like they could just give up. Queen 6, I pointed that out already. And then ace queen, because they just soak up the board so hard. So when you have, like if they have ace king, they should probably bet the turn, for example. If they have ace 7, they probably shouldn't pot the flop. So when they check the turn, they have some ace king, but a lot of it would bet the turn. They don't have much ace queen. They have too much. It's too much. So they would check. So that's kind of the way that I would think about this player's range for the most part. And then on the river here, yeah, I mean, like it's thin when we bet. I do think betting is probably the play, but it's really thin, and I think this is probably far too large. I think you probably want to try to bet like 4.5 or like even 3,500 or 3,000. And you're trying almost to like make it very difficult for this player to fold some hands like
King
King
Jack or something.
Deuce, King 5.
Mm.
Yeah, maybe King Jack. If they, yeah, like King Jack's the type of hand that's close, like King Jack suited. So yeah, you're I'm trying to create some EV out of thin air almost. But I do think Ace Queen is a very likely holding. They have like it's blocked heavily by the board, but Queen 6 is not unblocked by the board either. And you have a queen in your hand, right? I mean, you block Ace Queen, but you also block Queen 6. So there's not a lot of EV here for you, right? And so for me, it's just so easy for you to lose. I'd probably prefer a much smaller. I do prefer a bet to a check, but I prefer a much smaller bet. And then we do get the 2-bet. And what are you thinking now?
I mean, at this point, I just like. I mean, I think the very least what I need is like the king of diamonds if I want to call here. I just don't think that I'm in the part of my range where I'm just not high enough to consider hero calling. I think because the ranges are actually like super fucking strong. After his pot bet on the flop, we both fill out diamonds. We both have a ton of trips in our hands. So I just think that king queen just is pretty much dust in terms of hero calling.
Yeah. So you're basically just saying, yeah, I've better hands. I have trips. I have flushes. So I don't have to call this.
Yeah.
I would agree. Yeah, I think that you just have too many hands that are, even if you have the diamond, as you mentioned, like it's even the diamond's not enough. You just have so. I mean, look, you have so much trips, right? I mean, you just check call the flop here.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you have ace 8 of hearts, right? So you limp pre-flop, you get ice. I have ace 8 of hearts, I call. Flop's ace high, you check. He bets. He bets pot. You're like, wow. Okay, I have ace 8, I call. You check. He checks. Get to the river. You're like, okay, I have ace 8. I guess I bet. He jams. And you're like, oh my gosh, I have ace 8. I still lose, right? Like if he's value betting, he probably has ace queen. But like you block ace queen pretty nicely with your ace 8. You block ace 4 pretty nicely, which is another hand he may show up with or something. So yeah, I mean, you just have trips a lot. You have trips a lot. You have flushes, right? You could have diamonds. Yeah. So there's no real reason to hero call this hand. So I agree with fold. So
yeah, good, because like this is a situation where sometimes I'm afraid I'm getting a little bit run over. But I realized during playing that this was just like ranges are so stronger. I didn't have that sort of like fuck I'm getting run over by this guy feeling. Right. So that's good. But it's really good it's really comforting to hear you go over the hand like that. So nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, cheers.
All right, peace. All right, guys, that concludes the strategy video. I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. I think it's really important to realize where the value comes from when we bet, where does our bluffs come from, and also where does the value and bluffs from our opponent come from, which is obviously equally as important. I think with the last hand, King Queen, you can really tell there that it seems like a strong hand, but really the only thing that matters for us when we're deciding on a call is trip aces or flushes when we really want to make a tough call. So I felt I played the hand great. It makes me feel a lot better about playing the hand as well, which is of course the power of studying. If you want to find out more about poker strategy and if you want to start studying yourself, the BBZ links are in the description. The man, the myth, the legend. There's free stuff. There's stuff for $10 you can find there. It's a really excellent start to your poker studying career. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like, subscribe if you want to see more and if you want to get notified of new videos coming out. See you guys next time.